With that then, let me inquire at this time if the prosecution is ready to call its next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. People call Sergeant Gerald Johnson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Okay, please be seated. Could you please tell us your name and spell your first and last names?
Certainly, Sergeant Specialist Gerald Johnsgard, and that's G-E-R-A-L-D. Spelling the last name is J-O-N, S as in Sam, G-A-A-R-D.
Sergeant Johnsgard, could you pull the microphone up to you better?
How's that?
I think we'll see once you start to talk.
Very good.
Could you please tell us how you're employed?
I'm a Specialist Sergeant with the City of Aurora. I work District 1 graveyard shift.
And City of Aurora, the police department?
Correct.
Where is District 1?
District 1 is located on the Fitzsimmons campus. It encompasses everything from 225 to the west to the Denver city limits.
How long have you worked in law enforcement?
With Aurora for 36 years in July.
Did you work in law enforcement prior to that as well?
Military police for 3 years.
Were you working on July 20th of 2012?
Yes, I was.
What did your duties consist of at that time?
At that time and at the present, I was a Specialist Sergeant, once again assigned to District 1. I run a training team for new recruit officers.
Now, you said you were working graveyards.
Yes.
What hours was that?
10 at night till 8 in the morning.
And that's what you're currently working?
Correct.
Did you hear a call come out on July 20th at about 12:39 a.m. To respond to the Century 16 Theater?
Yes, it was a shots fired call that came out.
Were you asked specifically to respond?
It was a broadcast that was aired to the whole districts, all the districts involved. Shots fired calls are usually toned and then aired out.
Where is the Century 16 Theater located?
14300 block, East Alameda Avenue or Drive, located in the city of Aurora, county of Arapahoe, state of Colorado.
Where were you coming from?
The 200 block of South Potomac, which is about 10 blocks away as the crow flies.
How long did it take you to get from where you were to the theater?
To the theater, probably less than a minute.
How fast were you driving?
Probably not over 70.
How did you approach the theater?
Initially, I intended to come in off of Sable, which would be on the east side of the theater. But they were doing road construction, gravel trucks. I was blocked from going in at the first entrance, so I went up to the next entrance farther to the south.
Are you familiar with that area?
Somewhat.
When you entered to park, where did you park?
I ended up parking just to the southeast of the theater complex. I noted when I got back there that it was high ground. There was a retaining wall. You could see the entire back of the theater.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to approach you with what has been marked as People's Exhibit 4740. Do you recognize this?
That's an aerial view of the theater itself and the adjacent parking lot.
And does it fairly and accurately represent the area on July 20th of 2012?
It does, with the exception of a dumpster that was located in the rear
Your Honor,
of
I
the theater.
would move for the admittance of People's Exhibit 4740.
Any objection?
Objection.
Thank you. Yeah, without objection, it is admitted.
Now, if you could explain on this, and you still need to keep your microphone with you, or?
I'll figure it out.
Okay. If you could explain, where is the theater on this map?
This is the theater itself. This is the front of the theater. The rear of the theater, which pretty much, this is eastbound. This is Sable Avenue. The entrance I intended to come in was farther to the north on Sable, but it was blocked, so I came all the way up and turned into an entrance somewhere in here to the right-hand side.
For perspective, where would Interstate 225 be?
Directly this way, angled a bit,
Over on this direction?
more or less,
And
yes.
how about Alameda?
Alameda would be this way, to the north.
So now you indicated you came in from the south.
I was headed north to south. I came in, made a turn, blacked out, ended up coming into this area right here, blacked out, which commands a view. This is a flat picture, but this wall here is approximately 1 story high, commanding view of the back of the theaters.
So you could see everything that was going on in the back of the theater.
Right, the parking lot was lit up. I knew I was probably one of the first cars, especially in the back, so I thought I'd take control of that.
When you first got to the back, so that you can get closer to the microphone, when you first got to the back, what could you see?
The first thing I saw were some construction workers located right in this area. I'm not sure what they were doing, if they were water workers or what.
On the west side of the theater?
This is more of the south side of the theater. I could see their orange and yellow vests, that type of thing. They were staring at the theater itself. As soon as I got out, they saw me and were yelling about something was going on. I deployed my rifle, told them to take cover, and moved immediately to the railing area.
Now, when you say deployed your rifle, what do you mean?
I took out my AR-15, chambered around, turned on the optics, and came to the wall, overlooking the rear of the theater.
And turning on the optics?
Turning my red light, or my red dot sight on.
So you have your rifle out, you have the sight on, and what are you seeing?
At this point, nothing. There's no activity for the most part in back of the theater. There's a white car located in the first spot behind the theater. They were airing information about shooting in Theater 9. I had no idea which Theater 9 was at this point. I didn't know if it backed up to this, if it was on the sides. I'm not really familiar with this theater.
What did you see next?
Noted the car, noted 2 other cars parked in the parking lot. There's a dumpster right here. I'm not sure what they were doing, some construction obviously, but it didn't block much of any of the parking lot, with the exception of the alcove right in this area. I stayed at that area, rifle deployed. In about a minute to 2, the construction workers started yelling that they believed someone had been shot, that there was a female shot, something along those lines. I took my sights off the back of the lot, told them to have that party take cover, apply first aid, just stay down.
At the point that they were telling you that they'd seen somebody was shot, had you seen any people come outside of the theater?
No, the back lot was completely empty. I could see officers cutting across from Sable on foot, coming into the the north end of the lot, working their way towards me to the south.
What did you see next?
When I came back on sight view, I noticed that there was a person standing next to this white car. The door was open, and I believed it was a SWAT officer.
Why did you think that?
Due to his appearance, the gas mask, helmet, black outfit. Didn't see any weapon per se, but I thought, how did the SWAT guy get here so quick?
That seemed strange to you?
Very.
What were the lighting conditions like behind the theater?
Oh, very bright. All lit up. You could see everything. There are lights back there for the back of the theater, like most businesses, security lighting and parking lot lights.
Now, at the point that you saw a person standing next to a white car, was there anybody else behind the theater?
2 officers were located the other side of the vehicle. 2 officers that had moved up from the north end of the parking lot were obviously checking the back of the business also.
And we're saying they're coming from the north end. So you pointed out on the map where the vehicle was, and then where were the officers in relationship to that?
Directly to the north of that vehicle, maybe 20 to 30 yards at most. They were approaching the vehicle. They'd obviously seen this person.
How were they approaching?
Guns drawn. They were giving commands, I believe, although from my distance I couldn't hear what they were. I then noted that the party threw his arms up in the air.
And the party, which party are you talking about?
The gentleman in the black SWAT outfit, or what I thought was a SWAT outfit, who was standing by the open door of the white car.
When you saw that, what did you think?
I thought that's our suspect. As a matter of fact, I tried to get on the air, asked him to hold the air, and asked the officers, is that our suspect?
What do you mean by hold the air?
A lot of chatter going on. We're tied into 1 or 2 channels. The cars are responding, active information. A lot of people are talking, trying to get their information out. So when I request to hold the air, everybody be quiet, something important.
Did that occur?
For a short time span, yes.
What did you say on the air when you got the air cleared to see that you could talk?
I asked officers, is that the suspect by the white car? Something along those lines. They said, yes, it is. We have a gas mask, a rifle, et cetera, et cetera. I said, hold him. I'm coming down.
So how did you get down from where you were to the back of the theater?
Moved to the west, down a little hill, back around to the side of the theater. This would be the south side of the theater, around the corner, over to the east side of the theater.
And do we have a photo of 4740? Pull that up, that might be helpful. And a photograph should be coming up that will be the same as the poster that you've already seen. Or perhaps not. You indicated that you were coming up on that you had to come down, you had to get down from where you were, because you said that you are essentially a story above where
Correct.
where the back of the theater is. So how did you get down there?
What I did is I just moved to my left, which would be to the west, crossed into the grassy area, and then took a small hill down to the parking lot.
How long did it take you to get from where you were to the back of the theater?
Maybe 10 to 15 seconds tops.
When you got to the back of the theater, what did you see?
I saw that they were stripping items off a gentleman who was on the ground, that they'd pulled off a helmet, were pulling off a vest, and had him proned out, cuffing him out.
Where was he in relation to the white car that you'd seen?
Directly to the south of the white car, about 10 to 15 feet.
So he was no longer right at the driver's side door?
No,
Do you recall, was the driver's side door open?
still open.
And you recalled seeing a helmet and what else?
Gas mask, helmet, some type of vest. I'm not sure if it was ballistic or not. Some type of chaps, black pants maybe, something along those lines.
Do you know who the two officers were who were with him at
Yes.
that time? Who were they?
It would be Officer Oviatt and Officer Sweeney.
Were there other officers on scene yet?
Starting to. I could see at least 1 to 2 more officers coming in from the north, moving towards the south.
Are they coming in with guns drawn?
Yes.
Had you seen any people exit the theater yet?
No one had come out of the theater yet. At this point, I'm holding on the door to what appears to be the back of a theater. I noted at this door, I didn't know if it was Theater 9 or not, still, at this door on the ground was a rifle. It looked like an AR rifle laying on the ground.
So a large rifle?
Yes.
What else did you see on the ground?
That was pretty much it. I saw the rifle there. No one had exited the door. I'm trying to cover this door, cover the officers who are moving in from the north.
What did you think about the fact that there's a rifle on the ground? Did you think it was a law enforcement rifle?
At this point, I'm thinking, no cop would have left that there. So I'm thinking that may be the weapon involved. Maybe, I don't know at this point. Later on, I was able to determine that it was not one of our rifles, just due to the optics on the rifle.
We talked about the optics. What are you talking about?
You'd call it a scope. We carry EOTech scopes, which are low-profile hologram-type sights. I think that at the time, that was all that was authorized. This was called an aim-point scope, which is more of a scope like you'd see on a hunting rifle, something more similar to that, not something that APD would be carrying.
Did you notice anything else near or about the door?
About the door itself, not at this point. Later on, I noted that the door itself wasn't shut, and wasn't shutting because there was a plastic tab, I guess you'd call it, holding it from shutting all the way.
What color was the plastic tab?
I want to say green. I also noted that that green sort of tab, which is a strange-looking thing, was also laying near the property of the defendant who was on the ground being cuffed.
And at this point, the defendant, where was he in relation to his car?
Probably 10 to 15 feet to the south of the vehicle, proned out on the pavement, head facing to the north. He would be about 10 feet to my right as I'm watching the open doorway, or the doorway area to my left.
Did you get a chance to look at him, to see his face?
Yes,
Do you believe you'd recognize him again if you saw him?
most certainly.
Is he in this courtroom today?
Seated at the defendant's table, a white shirt with blue squares, wearing glasses, small beard, didn't have a beard then.
Your Honor, would you let the record reflect identification of the defendant?
The record will so reflect.
Does he look different now than he did then?
Yes.
How?
Heavier, his hair was pretty much bright orange that night, much longer, clean shaven for the most part.
Now, you're seeing the defendant laying on the ground near some distance away from the car, and those officers on scene, you said other officers were arriving.
Correct.
At that point, what else is starting to happen behind the theater?
About this time, a female came busting out the rear door, the one I was covering, startled me. Door smacks open, she comes running out, starts running towards me. I tell her to move to her left, which would be my right. I've got her at gunpoint, I'm not sure who she is. I'm telling her to move to the north, just move down a few steps. She keeps running. She's on her way out of there. About this time, a gentleman comes out. His pants are flapping, obviously bloody. He's got a pretty good leg wound. He's also headed to the north now. So I go after them, telling them to stop. An officer is coming in from the north. He too is telling them to stop. We travel about 30 to 40 feet. They stop. She's screaming. She's hysterical. She says that there's somebody shooting. We got to get away. We got to get away. Something to that effect. I tell her, and by now there's another third gentleman who's shown up, who's come out the theater. They're all right there in close proximity. I say, sit down. They all immediately drop to the ground.
Why did you tell them to sit down?
So we could control them and figure out what's going on. I guess I was a little stunned that they just dropped.
We can now see the picture up on the screen, and if we have a pointer that up here. Oh, this is, okay. And I don't know if it'll work or not, so if you can give it a shot and see if it does. But if it, does it work on the screen?
You can barely see it.
We did.
All right.
Please keep your voice up because you're looking away from the microphone, okay?
Will do, sir.
Or you can pull the mic some with you too, I think.
All right.
If you could point out where the exit door was that you saw people coming from on that.
The exit door itself would be in the alcove. Picture's a little grainy, but right in here for the most part. This is a locked trash bin. There's a gate on the front, and the exit door alcove goes straight in here.
And when you first saw police officers coming up towards, where was the white car on this map?
White car would be in the first parking spot, right there.
When you first saw police officers coming up towards the person by the right car, where were they coming from?
I noticed them first coming in, out in the parking lot. My thought process was they were too exposed. But of course, I can't get on the air to say anything. They were coming in from, like I said, north to the south. And they're probably somewhere in this area when they gunpoint the defendant at his car here.
And you're pointing near to where the car was parked in that first space.
Correct. They were just to the west and the north of the vehicle.
Now, the people who came out of the theater and started to run, where did they run towards?
They made it, she came out originally right towards me. I directed her to go to her right, hand motions, move that way. And she got to about right here, and then the officer who was coming up, another officer, not the two who had already contacted the defendant, stopped her. So she's there, the gentleman who was bleeding from the leg wound is here, and a third gentleman behind him are there.
And were you able to stop them in that vicinity?
Yes,
not
I
too
ran
far?
over to them also, told them to sit down, that we'd take care of them, because she was pretty hysterical, she wanted to go. She wanted to run, I think that was her quote, we need to run away.
And you can have a seat again.
Thank you.
Were there police cars in the back of the theater at this time?
No. No cars had made it to the back of the theater at this point.
Do you know why that is?
I believe most of them had been blocked in on the north side, blocked in from the entrance in the front. The parking lot filled up fairly quick with people trying to leave, people trying to come in. I know the majority of officers seem to have gone to the front of the theater.
Were officers arriving at the back of the theater on foot?
On foot, yes.
Did you know whether or not there were officers inside the theater at this time?
No. I know they had been asking for officers to get gas masks so they could make entry, but I hadn't heard that anyone had gone inside yet.
Now, you said that you also found a rifle right next to the exit door. Did you have anyone stand by that rifle?
About the time that we'd secured the people who had run out the door, myself and at least 2 to 4 other officers were now at the back door. We could see that it was blocked open, so we said we're going to go in, cut right, cut left, and I grabbed one officer and said, watch the rifle, don't let anybody pick it up or kick it.
Did you enter the theater?
Yes.
When you first walked into the theater through that exit door, what did you see?
There's an alcove there. It dead ends about 5 feet to the left and then opens up to the theater about 2 feet, 3 feet on the right. As soon as you opened the door and walked in, pandemonium. There was gas in the air, CN or tear gas, you might call it, hit you immediately. Teared up, mucus formed, burned your face, burned your skin. But you could tell fairly quick what it was, or I could tell fairly quick what it was, and I knew it wasn't going to be incapacitating. It was just really uncomfortable. It was dark. The movie was playing. There was a siren going off intermittently and white strobe lights. As soon as you made entry into the theater room itself, you could see to the left and off to your right, there were people up and down, some in the seats, some screaming, some pointing. The noise was such that you could not hear much of anything except for the sirens, the claxtons.
Had you been in a circumstance like this before in your career as a police officer?
Sustained.
How would you describe then your ability to respond in the theater given all these things that were going on?
I guess I could only refer it back to some training we'd had, and noise confusion was part of that training. I'm sure that helped. If I wanted someone to do someone, I had to grab them and tell them, yell at them, scream at them, take that exit, cover that side, go down this hallway. I should note that once we made it into the theater, once I came in the door, I saw officers to my left on the stairway starting to go up into the crowd area. So officers had made it in.
Was it possible to be heard in the theater, to talk to a person?
Talk, no. I could scream at people and they could figure out what I was saying, like cover, clear, that type of thing, but you had to yell and they had to be in front of you to be heard.
Could you tell how many people, patrons, were in the theater at that time?
With the darkness and the strobes, I'd say probably at least 30 plus, and that's a guess. My world is limited to a short area around me and then objects far away. I saw an exit that I wanted covered. I noticed that one hallway probably led to another exit, and then a hallway on the far side, I didn't know at this time, probably led to another exit. So I wanted those covered, cleared.
Do you have any idea how many officers were in the theater at that point?
There were more coming in behind me, I could tell you that, and more coming down the hallway. Probably at least 6 to 10, and that's a guess.
Once you got into the theater, and was your first goal to try to secure the exits?
Secure the exits, make sure that no one else is inside who's armed the best we can. No one was shooting, so we figured there probably wasn't. My assumption was that the shooter that we probably had in the back hopefully was the only one. I know a statement had been made saying he was, but you're never quite sure. At that point, it was just to secure the interior and then start getting people out.
How did you get people out of the theater?
People who could hear me or people who could hear the officers were told to get up, exit through the back doors. As soon as they got outside, they were set down, told to sit down, visually cleared for the most part, making sure they didn't look like a shooter, they weren't armed, that type of thing. The ones that were moving, a lot of them had blood on them. As soon as we got them outside, you could tell that we needed to start some sort of triage.
Did you see any weapons in the theater?
At this point, no. My second trip, or one of my trips back in, an officer pointed out a 12-gauge shotgun. that was laying just inside the entrance area of the theater. 870 model, long barrel with extended magazine. Once again, I could tell it was not one of our police shotguns.
How could you tell that it was not?
The extended mag, the length of the barrel, just the look of it. Ours are fairly unique, fairly short, numbered, strapped. You can tell they're police weapons.
Did you see any other items that went along with firearms?
Yeah, saw a number of magazines inside the theater, some of them 40 rounders, the longer extended ones, some 30 rounders. Saw
For what kind of a firearm?
223. My assumption was 223 AR.
Would that be the kind of magazines that you would use in the rifle that you'd seen outside the back door?
The kind of rifle that was seen outside the back door and the rifle I was carrying, yes.
And I'm sorry, you indicated you saw magazines.
In the hallway, headed to my left, which would be the south side hallway leading out of the theater, there was a snail drum or a beta mag, which is, I believe, a 90 or 100 round magazine that you stick in an AR.
Did you see any other kind of ammunition in the theater?
I saw some spent 12-gauge rounds, green casings, on the ground. I saw empty 40 caliber rounds, one fully loaded 40 caliber round, a lot of empty casings for 223s, a lot of full rounds for 223s.
Full rounds meaning unspent, unshot?
Unspent,
rounds.
unshot.
While you were in the theater, did you see a young girl in the theater?
Yes, on one of my trips back into the theater, following a trip outside for triage, someone had brought Veronica Mosier down to the front of the theater from farther up while they were treating other people. She was just inside the door when I walked in. I bent down, felt for a pulse. There was no pulse. The only wound I could see was a wound in the abdomen on the right-hand side. At that point, I saw Sergeant Hawkins, who was an officer at the time, coming down the stairs. I got his attention, said, I want her triaged, I want her out of here. He picked her up and carried her out. He felt for a pulse. Later had mentioned that he thought he felt one, but he hadn't because his own pulse or something to that line. But
Even though, when you first saw her, did you feel that she was still alive?
no.
Given that, why did you choose to not leave her in the theater?
Her age. I wasn't keeping a child in my crime scene. You know, if there was any possibility she needed to go. I didn't want my officers stepping over her. I didn't want her at the scene.
Now, you said that you went in and out of the theater at least more than once.
4 to 5 times probably while there were still people there.
Why were you going in and outside of the theater?
Just to make the triage was working. The problem with the triage we had is there were so many victims coming out of the theater that we started to group up right outside the rear door. So we started to have the people who could walk, who could talk, move farther to the north.
While you were in the theater, did you see people that appeared to you to be deceased?
Yes.
Was anyone checking them to ensure that they were deceased and couldn't be saved?
Officers who initially came in were checking all the bodies that were there. Later on, when triage was started outside, I told other officers to make sure you double-checked those victims. And then later on, a third time, I personally checked the victims.
Why did you do that?
I guess it's just wanting to make sure that nothing more could be done. Personal side is my son was supposed to go to this movie, not at the theater, but somewhere. So I just wanted to make sure there too.
At some point when you were in the theater, was the movie turned off?
At some point it was, yes. I know an officer had been yelling to get it turned off, and finally in one of my trips it was, and the lights were on.
Were the alarms still going?
Strobes were still flashing. There wasn't the audible sound anymore.
Once the alarm sound was off, could you hear anything else in the theater?
Cell phones. All the cell phones that were left were laying on the ground were ringing. That kept going on all night long.
How long were you in the theater making trips in and out? Do you have any idea?
I think we cleared the theater out for the bomb squad to come and check the vehicle, made sure everything was gone, or all the people were out, except for officers that I stationed inside to remain with the victims. We were probably out of there within 35 to 37 minutes.
Do you know why the bomb squad was called?
Our concern was a secondary device in the vehicle that we believe the defendant had drove there.
Why were you concerned about that?
He'd made a statement to the officers outside that his apartment had been rigged to explode. Thus, we assumed that maybe the car also had been rigged. We weren't sure.
Were there people outside around the car?
We still had triage just completed in that area. We still had some victims farther to the north of the car. When I came out, I said, everybody's out of here, back lot clear. So they were taken around to the front side or the north side of the theater.
During the time that you were making trips in and out and triaging people in the back, had victims been transported at all from the back of the theater?
Yes, officers had taken it upon themselves to load people in cars and get them out of there.
At what point did that begin?
I think the first officer asked permission or made the statement, I'm taking them in my car, within about 4 minutes. I know another sergeant had said, are we clear to transport these folks? And the acknowledgement was, yeah, get them out of there.
Did you see police cars pulling up in the back and having victims loaded into them?
I didn't actually see the victims being loaded in. I know that officers would run up. They were yelled at to go back and get their cars, drive it across the grass, jump the curb, get it back here so we can transport.
How long did you remain on scene at the theater?
At the theaters or inside the theaters till about 6:30 in the morning. I went to the command post and cleared that about 7:30. Went and wrote reports and went home around 2 o'clock.
One moment, please. Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you.
Mr. King, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I have no questions.
All right, thank you. It looks like the jury may have a question or more, so if you would give us a minute, please.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Would counsel please approach? Specialist Sergeant There are a few questions the jury has submitted. Based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, I have found all of them to be appropriate, and so I'm going to ask all those questions now. The first question is, did the defendant say anything to you or otherwise verbalize when he was getting cuffed up or around that time? And just so that you're clear, this question is asking whether you personally heard the defendant say anything or verbalize anything.
I heard nothing that I could understand. I know the officers that were cuffing him.
Hold on. You
I
can't
heard
talk
nothing.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. You can't talk about what the officer said.
Got it,
That would be
Your Honor.
hearsay. Okay. The second question is, what was his general demeanor upon being cuffed?
Fairly wide-eyed. He looked like he was hot, but then again, being in Kevlar would do that. That was it. Wasn't aggressive, wasn't yelling, wasn't screaming, was just being cuffed up, having stuff removed.
The last question is, was he resisting being cuffed?
And it didn't appear to be, no.
Any follow-up questions based on those questions from the jury, Ms. Pearson? Any follow-up questions from you, Mr. King, based on the questions from the jury?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. May the specialist sergeant be released from his subpoena?
Yes, for the people, Your Honor.
Any objection, Mr. King?
None.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Call your next witness, please.
Annette Brooke, Your Honor.
Good morning. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
All right, please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names.
Annette Brooke, Annettebrooke.
Mr. Orman, you may proceed.
Thank you. This may sound like a ridiculous question in that you're wearing an Aurora police officer's uniform, but what is your job?
I'm a police officer with the City of Aurora.
How long have you been a police officer?
I'm into my 23rd year.
Always with Aurora?
Yes.
And what is your duty assignment?
I work patrol, Graveyards, District 1.
How about back on the early morning hours of July 20th, 2012? What was your duty assignment then?
Patrol, Graveyards, District 1.
You say graveyards. What was the shift then? When did you start? When did you stop?
Our graveyard shift is from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. We work 4/10s.
I'd like to ask you now some questions about the police response to the Aurora Century 16 Theater in the early morning hours of July 20th, 2012. Did you participate in the police response?
Yes, I did.
I want to ask you where you first were when, and I see you smiling, but I need to ask this question, where you first were when you heard the call that something was going on at the theater.
I was standing in 7-Eleven at 13697 East Isle waiting to use the bathroom.
Did you wait to use the bathroom or did you just leave?
I left.
Where'd you go?
Got in my patrol car and jumped on the highway and started heading towards the theater.
How far away, if you know, was this location of the 7-Eleven from the theater?
Roughly 20 blocks.
How long do you think it took you to get there?
A couple minutes, maybe.
Would it be fair to say you were driving pretty fast?
Yes, it would.
Lights and sirens?
Absolutely.
While you were driving there, did you notice any other police cars on the way?
All over. It was in District 2, and I was coming from District 1, but they'd aired it on both channels, so everybody started going.
Now, I want to ask you about the drive over there and whether you received any information over the radio that caused you to take any unusual actions or use any unusual police equipment that you would not normally use?
While I was en route, dispatch was airing that they were still getting calls and that there were still shots being fired in the theater. Before I got on scene, officers were airing that anybody coming on scene needs to get their gas masks because gas had been deployed in the theater.
Now, do you carry a gas mask in your vehicle when you're on patrol?
Always.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what I've marked for identification purposes as People's Exhibit 4739.
Yes.
Can use that microphone there.
Okay.
What is this?
That's an aerial display of the theater.
Is this an accurate depiction of the situation at that theater, the way it would have looked that night?
No, that's a typical day. That's
Okay.
not at all the way it looked.
Fair enough. It's not a nighttime picture.
But-
But is it an accurate depiction of the layout where the streets are, where the theater is?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move to admit 4739.
Any objection? Okay, without objection, Exhibit 4739 is admitted.
And Your Honor, if it's okay, I'd like to put it up on the monitor because that seems to work a little better.
Okay, let's do that. It may be published. And it may be easier to just give her a handheld microphone. Do you want us to do that?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank
Okay,
you.
could we do that, please?
Now, you have that microphone. You see that, it's a couple of flagpoles that I've taped together there as sort of a makeshift pointer.
Yes.
Can you point out on 4739 where you parked your car?
Sorry. Right here.
Okay, you can take a seat again. I'm going to ask you some more questions about this. Why did you park your car there up on that, looks like it's a sidewalk across the parking lot?
I could not get any closer to the theater. Between the people and the commotion, the confusion, I couldn't get any closer, so I had to park it there. That was as close as I could get.
Tell me about what you saw when you drove up, what you saw going on in that parking lot to the, I guess it's the northwest of the theater.
There were people running out of the theater. Some were screaming, some were crying. There were officers that were already on scene that were calling for rescue. Paramedics, we call them rescue. AFD paramedics and ambulances to get there. So it was chaos.
When you parked your car up there on that sidewalk, did you just run out of your car, or did you have to go get your gas mask somehow?
I had to get my gas mask and right helmet from the trunk, so I did that very quickly. And then I put on the gas mask as I was running through the parking lot.
So if you can, just sort of describe, you have your car up there, and you see there's sort of this like pinkish sort of wall coming out of the theater. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
How did you get there? Can you describe the route you took and use those as points of reference?
I ran diagonally from where I pointed my car, or from where I pointed to where my car was, to the area where that, sorry,
If you want to use the pointer, use the pointer.
to right about here.
Okay.
So I just ran diagonally.
And you said that you were sort of in the process of putting the gas mask on as you're running across the parking lot, is that right?
Correct.
Between now this time where you got out of your car and you got to that door that you pointed out, and you're putting on your gas mask, did you see any people that appeared to you to be injured in that parking lot?
Many. Some were on the ground, some were still running out, some were running towards officers, some were just running to get away from the theater.
Do you have any idea of how many injured people you might have seen?
Dozens?
Now, under normal circumstances, when you're responding to a scene and you see people with, well, let me ask you this, I forgot to ask this. What type of injuries did you see?
They were bloody. I didn't stop to see what kind of injuries, but some had blood on their arms, some had blood on their faces, blood on their body, blood on their hands. From the information that I had going to there, I was assuming those were gunshot wounds.
Under normal circumstances, as a police officer, encountering people that are running around upset with possible gunshot wounds, would you normally stop and render assistance?
Absolutely.
Did you do so here?
No, I had to get in the theater.
Why would you ignore people with gunshot wounds or potential gunshot wounds in the parking lot to get into the theater?
We did not know where the suspect was. The officers that were on scene at the time could not get in the theater because the gas was so thick. So those of us that had the gas masks on had to get to the theater, get inside, make sure that the suspect or suspects weren't in there still reloading or, waiting for a secondary ambush.
Is that part of your police training when you have one of these active shooter situations?
Yes, we run towards the gunfire. We stop the shooting. Stop any more victims from becoming victims.
I want to now ask you about going into that theater building there. Did you go in?
Yes, I did.
And let's talk about the lobby area. We can take that down. Thank you. Let's talk about the lobby area first. Did you go into the lobby?
I did.
And were you wearing your gas mask?
Yes, I was by that time.
And the same type of uniform you got now?
That's correct.
Can you tell me what you saw when you went into that lobby area?
I saw more victims coming out. They had blood on them. People were screaming. People were crying. I run up to a couple officers. There's some confusion as to where Theater 9 was. So I'd gone up to a couple officers trying to ask where Theater 9 was, and I could see where the people were coming from, so that's where I went to.
Now, did you have any other weapons other than your normal sidearm?
No.
And at this point, was that still in the holster, or did you have it out?
I believe it was still in the holster, but I had it out when I was in the theater. I remember that.
Now, tell me now about going into the theater.
I don't remember the first time I went. I don't remember actually going in the theater. I just remember consciously being in the theater.
Let's go then to that point where you consciously remember being in the theater. Where were you?
I was standing at the main level in between the flat seats and the seats that start to become stadium seats.
Okay, I've got a model here, and why don't you take that handheld microphone? And I'm going to hand you this laser pointer. And why don't you go around there? And does this look like the theater? Go around to the side, please. So-
Yes, it does.
Okay, and let me point it this way a little bit. Can you please point out where you first remember being?
Right about there.
Okay, so right around here towards the back of the flat part
Yes.
on what, if you're facing the screen, would be the right-hand side.
Yes.
Okay, and let me point it this way. And if you could show that to the members of the jury. And you pointed the same spot.
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. You can go back to your seat. I want to go to this point now where you remember being there. Can you describe, apart from, and we're going to get to the people and things like that you saw in the theater, but I want you to describe the lighting and the sound and what you heard and saw as far as that's concerned, when you remember there being in the theater.
It was dim. The movie was still playing. The alarm was going off.
And let's talk about the alarm. You mean like a fire alarm?
Yeah, I believe it to be a fire alarm.
And was there lights from the fire alarm too?
Yes.
Okay. Please continue.
It was dim. I could smell the gas.
Well, you were wearing a gas mask, right?
Right. The gas didn't affect me, didn't do what it does if you don't have the mask on, which is the teary eyes, the runny nose, the coughing. But it had a definite odor, and I could smell that.
Please continue.
And then I began to notice the bodies, the live victims, the blood. And then we had to clear the theater to make sure the shooter or shooters weren't still in the theater.
All right, let's start with that. And in police lingo, we've heard you say clear the theater. What does the word clear mean in police lingo?
That means go up, row by row, aisle by aisle, make sure we don't have somebody laying down with a gun ready to pop up and start shooting again.
Did you...
So clear it means secure it, I guess.
Secure. Did you and other officers then go and secure the theater, clear it?
Yes, we did.
Describe how that happened.
I went up one aisle, and there were already officers going up, and we just did quick clearance, looking down the aisles, the rows of seats, making sure we didn't have anybody with a gun. That's before we started working with the victims.
Did you see anybody with a gun?
No.
Now, at this point, did you know anything about what other officers might be encountering outside of the rear of the theater?
No, I did not.
And with the noise and everything going on in the theater, do you think you would have heard something coming over your police radio?
The only thing that I heard coming over the police radio were the other officers that were still screaming for ambulances.
You talked about clearing the theater and not finding any other threats. When you were doing that, did you see injured parties?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about the injured parties that you saw.
Some were standing, bleeding. Some were laying down. Some weren't injured, but were pointing to other injured people, trying to get our attention for them.
Did you take any actions yourself to help any of the injured people?
Yes, I did.
Now, was this at your own volition, or was it at the order of somebody, or both?
Both. I believe it was Officer Jarrell said, because we weren't getting rescue paramedic people in, and we had some very badly injured people that we had to get out and get to help. So I believe the phrase was, if it's got a pulse, get them out of here. So we started any ambulatory people, anybody that looked like they could walk, we were getting them first.
Do you remember helping then people get out of the theater?
Yes, I do.
I'd like to first ask you about an injured African-American male. Do you remember helping that person?
Yes, I do.
Where was that person when you first came in contact with them?
He was standing in the portion of the theater that goes up that I refer to as like the stadium seating, and he was in the rows, and he was holding his arm, and I remember seeing blood coming out of his arm.
What did you do to help him?
I called to him a couple times, and he wouldn't come to me, so I actually reached out, took a hold of him, and helped him to crawl over the seats and around a female that was laying down. And I escorted him out and handed him off to another officer.
Where did you escort him to?
I escorted him out the regular door that you would leave the theater.
In other words, to the front into the lobby.
Yes. When I got to the lobby area, I handed him off to another officer, and I went back inside.
I want to now ask you about an injured white female wearing black pants. Did you assist a woman fitting that description?
Yes, I did.
Can you please describe where you saw her, what her injuries were, and what you did?
She was also in the stadium seating portion, in the rows of seats, and she'd been shot in the leg, so she couldn't walk. So she was the next one that we got out. And I crawled over the seats, and I believe it was Officer Weber, handed her back to me, and I held her while he crawled over the seats so we could get her to the main aisle, down the stairs, and out the theater. I got about halfway down the stairs, Officer Weber and I got about halfway down the stairs with her when the officer said, I got it, so I went back up for somebody else.
Did you see where he took her?
No. I don't know if he took her out the emergency exit or out the main one.
All right, so you went somewhere else. Where'd you go?
Went back up to the stadium seating aisle, and I saw a male laying face down with his arm outstretched. He was unresponsive, unconscious, and I wasn't sure if he was alive at first. And then I saw what looked like his back move. So I called out that we had another one, and I grabbed his arm, the one that was outstretched, and pulled him towards me. We rolled him over, and I could see where he'd been shot, and it appeared to be gunshot because there were several holes.
What, you mean gunshot? Like
Sorry, shotgun.
Okay.
Shotgun.
Please continue.
He was still unresponsive, but alive. So we picked him up and carried him out using the emergency exit to a patrol car that was parked right outside there put him in the back of the patrol car, and that officer took him to the hospital.
Now, you say the emergency exit. Do you mean the exit in the back of the theater that would sort of go towards that front of the model?
Yes.
I'd like to have you describe with this person, with this male that you were helping, what you saw when you went outside, what you observed when you took him to the police car, and how you got him into the police car.
We just basically threw him in the back of the car. He never woke up. I did find out later that he did live, but he never woke up, so we just got him in the car. When I went back in through the emergency exit door, and I noticed an assault rifle laying on the ground with an officer standing over it.
Do you know the name of the male that you helped into the car?
No, I don't.
Now, under normal circumstances, on a normal police call, would you, stop to get that information?
Yes, I would.
But could you do that here?
No, there was no time.
You described going back in through that back door, and you described seeing a rifle on the ground. Did that look like a police rifle to you?
It did.
What did you do then?
Walked around the rifle and went back inside to see if there were any more people that we could get out.
Did you help anyone else inside the theater then?
Sorry.
That's okay. That's what the water's there for.
I tried to help a female that was in the stadium row of seating. She was sitting down, very pale, very sweaty, holding her stomach, and it looked like she'd been shot across the stomach. It looked like she was holding her guts in, and she was covered in blood.
Did you do anything to help her?
We got her up, carried her to the main aisle to lead downstairs, and there was just too much blood and she was in too much pain to continue that way. So we laid her down in the main aisle, and a couple officers went to get a collapsible stretcher to put her on the stretcher and carry her out that way. When they did that, I went to continue searching.
Do you know who that female was?
I found out later what her name was.
What's her name?
Farah.
You say you then, after the other officers took her on the stretcher, you went and did some more searching. What did you find? What did you see?
Well, the bodies that we were leaving there, rifle casings. There was in the hallway.
Wait, let me stop you there for a second. You said the bodies that you were leaving there.
Yes,
Do you mean dead bodies?
yes,
How many did you see?
10.
All right, please continue.
There was blood on the seats, blood on the wall, blood on the emergency exit door, pools of blood on the floor. Like I say, there were rifle casings in that main area where I first showed you that I went in. In the hallway that leads out to the lobby was a couple rifle magazines that were still loaded.
Did you notice any other, you said you saw rifle magazines on the ground. Did you notice any evidence that firearms had been discharged inside the theater?
The casings, yes. I'm probably referring to things wrong. The rifle casings, spent rounds.
How long did you stay in the theater?
I don't know. I think a couple hours. Time just got really distorted.
Where'd you go then after you were done with the theater?
Well, I stayed in the theater till the paramedics came back in, when we finally did get a medic to come in. And then I was moved to once the medic had to come in and confirm that all of the bodies that we were leaving in the theater were dead, that we couldn't help them. So
You say confirmed. Did you knew that though?
Yeah, you could tell on some of them, and Officer Giroth had gone around and done a preliminary check on the ones. And then this medic came in and did a secondary check, just because. So then we could secure the theater, and by secure I mean lock it up, no one else in, no one else out, until our crime scene got there. So I was moved to the doors in the lobby immediately outside the theater.
When you were there in the theater, was there ever a time when the movie stopped?
They tore the screen down finally, so it wasn't, we couldn't see it, but we could still hear it. And eventually, I think somebody did get it to turn off.
How about the lights, the house lights? Did you ever remember them coming up or coming on?
I don't remember, I'm sorry.
Can I have a moment?
Yes.
Thank you, officer. I have no further questions.
Ms. Brady, do you have any questions? No questions, thank you. All right. There may be questions from the jury, so if you would give us a moment, please.
Okay.
Would counsel please approach? Ma'am, the jury has submitted a couple of questions that I have found to be appropriate based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law. And so I am going to ask you those questions now. The first question is, did you see injured people or deceased people in the flat part of the theater?
No, I don't recall seeing any in the flat part.
The second question is, were most of the injured or deceased in a concentrated area of the theater, or were the injured or deceased dispersed throughout the theater?
They were, the ones that I saw were in the stadium section, so the rise portion. And they were dispersed. Some were, I don't think there was anybody that was more than 2/3 of the way up. So I could say the lower portion of the stadium seating.
Any follow-up questions, Mr. Orman, based on those questions from the jury?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Any follow-up questions, Ms. Brady, based on those questions from the jury? All right, thank you. May she be released from her subpoena, Mr. Orman?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, without objection, you're released from your subpoena. Thank you. Okay. Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, you can call Josh Nolan.
Someone swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please be seated. Could you please tell us your name?
My name is Joshua Robert Nolan. First name is spelled Joshua. Middle name Robert. Last name Nowlan.
Mr. Brockler, you may proceed.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nolan, I want to begin with something that may seem obvious, and that is, were you in the theater when this shooting took place on July the 20th, 2012?
Yes, sir.
Now listen, to get you to that theater, there's some things I want to ask you about your background that give you a unique relationship to the theater, as well as why you got there, okay?
Yes, sir.
I want to take you back to July the 19th, 2012. What were you doing for a job back then?
I was a network engineer for a company called National Cinemedia. The company is a advertising company for the movie theaters